Hey, we've finally done it. At long last, we're exploring a science fiction film. Some of the best science fiction films, in my opinion, are from the 1950s, the atomic age, when the future looked bright and scary at the same time. Well, tonight we're diving into a seminal atomic age science fiction film, The Day the Earth Stood Still. I got so invested and distracted by this story that I was actually late to an appointment. I caused a lot of inconvenience for everyone involved. Was The Day the Earth Stood Still worth it? Yeah, but not in the way you might think. Then, on a completely unrelated note, my dog Olive's birthday is this month. So in her honor, I thought we'd spend some time with famous canine actors from Hollywood's golden age. Those dogs made their owners wealthy. Maybe that'll give Olive some ideas. Klaatu Barada Nikta, tonight on the Vintage Century Idle Hour.
Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce Jennifer Passariello.
Who are you?
It is me, Nico.
Nico? I don't know any Nico.
I am here on behalf of Lorenzo. I am his cousin. We are like brothers.
Wait a minute, where's Rodney?
I had to let him go.
Let him go? What do you mean, let him go?
He wasn't working out.
Well, who are you to be deciding whether he was working out or not?
Lorenzo told me Rodney was terrible, and I must agree. He's boring. He has no charisma, no charm.
Well, he was nice. He was easy to get along with.
He was dragging the show down.
Now, wait a minute.
I'm here to save the show.
There was nothing in the world wrong with Rodney. He had a great attitude. He was helpful. He watched the movies we talked about. He's an actor, you know.
An actor? Ha! I scoff at the very idea.
Well, scoff all you like, but he is. He has motivational videos out on YouTube.
Yes, I know. It's very embarrassing.
Well, Rodney was my AI-generated announcer in Superfan, and he was so pleasant.
I very humbly accept the role of your new AI-generated announcer and Superfan. Thank you.
Well, hold on. This is happening too fast. Now, you didn't hurt Rodney's feelings, did you?
Not at all.
Oh, good.
I wished him well and even offered him a tissue.
You offered him a tissue? Was he crying?
A little bit.
Oh, no.
So I suggested he watch one of his motivational videos.
Oh, you didn't.
Yes. Then he said something about posting negative reviews about our show on the internet.
What?
Oh, he made quite a scene. It was all very immature, if you ask me.
Oh, what is happening to my little show?
But look, now I am here. So Lorenzo said he was working on some new pretend sponsors when he left.
Yeah, I know about that. I mean, they were all terrible, by the way. I went with the least horrible of the bunch, a PSA about seatbelt safety.
I love Lorenzo like a brother, but he knows nothing about promotion.
And you do?
No, but I do know about the ladies.
Oh, my.
And I have a pretend sponsor of my own for all the ladies out there.
Really? And what's that?
The Zap It system by Acme.
Oh, not Acme again. What is the Zap It system for?
Do-it-yourself electrolysis for home use.
Oh, help. Tonight's Silver Screen Adventure takes us to Washington, D.C. at some undisclosed time period in the not-too-distant future. Now, I say not-too-distant future, though that was more true when The Day the Earth Stood Still was released in theaters than it is today. In some ways, the future depicted in that story is now, particularly with AI and machine learning being in full swing and advancing so quickly. Science fiction always seems like it's either wildly optimistic, all the diseases have been cured, there's great inventions that have all these conveniences, there's amazing space and time travel that's going on, so there's that either that kind of optimism or it's dystopian, with a post-apocalyptic Earth that's barely hanging on and the complete and total unraveling of society has already taken place. Well, The Day the Earth Stood Still is really neither of these. It's sort of intended, I guess, as sort of a canary in the coal mine. It's warning us to make big changes now to avert disaster in the future. Now, of all the stories that we've done in this series, this is the one that led me down this kind of crazy rabbit hole that was impossible to crawl out of. And while I was down there, I did lose track of time. And as I mentioned in our open, I missed an appointment. Now, you might think that I missed that appointment and got so distracted and everything because The Day the Earth Stood Still is some kind of masterpiece. And it kept me so enthralled that I could think of nothing else. No, that's not it. I mean, it was entertaining. I like vintage science fiction, so it had that going for it. But to compare this film with others that we've explored, like last week's Sunset Boulevard, for example, or really almost any of the other films that we've explored, this one is just not going to measure up. Now, I suspect that it wasn't intended to win an Oscar, that's not why they made this film. Although I will say that years after its release, it was inducted into the Library of Congress's National Film Registry. But no, I don't think it was supposed to be a masterpiece. This is a film that was intended to draw atomic age audiences to the theaters, and it did that. This movie was a hit. Now, I don't usually read film reviews, but I did this time. I did read some modern reviews of this film, and wow, it gets very high praise indeed. So, fair warning, I'm going to have some controversial opinions about this story. I kind of feel like everyone is totally missing the point. The Day the Earth Stood Still does offer a chilling warning, but I don't think it's the one that everybody's focusing on. Now, all of this is to say that it wasn't because The Day the Earth Stood Still was some sort of masterpiece that I got all distracted. It was the source material for the screenplay that got all my attention. The Day the Earth Stood Still is an extremely loose adaptation of a short story entitled Farewell to the Master by Harry Bates. Now, that story had been published in the October 1940 issue of Astounding Science Fiction magazine. I read this story a couple of days ago, and here comes another controversial opinion. I think it's vastly superior to the film. It underscores the point that I feel everyone is missing in evaluating the film. Okay, so I don't want to get ahead of myself here. Let's set all of that aside for the moment. We'll come back to that later. Let's talk about the genre. Okay, so this is our first science fiction film in our series. So I thought we'd do a super quick overview of what is science fiction, right? So I had an instructor in graduate school who really hit home the need for science in a science fiction story. I was taking a literature class. I think it was a young adult lit class, and we were studying science fiction at the time. And I remember him saying that, just because you have a futuristic setting or a futuristic backdrop doesn't mean that the story is science fiction. A science fiction story can actually take place in any era, as long as science plays some sort of role in the storyline. Now, I remember him noting the difference between Star Trek, for example, and Star Wars, right? So Star Trek included real and speculative scientific components, whereas Star Wars was essentially a fantasy film that just happened to be set in the future. Science featured prominently in the former and not at all in the latter. So for that reason, he said, Star Wars fit much more closely with Lord of the Rings than it did Star Trek. Well, I'm no expert on this, but I think that makes a lot of sense to me. Now, Dartmouth College has a film studies program, and I went out to their website and found that they have a definition for science fiction. They say this. They say science fiction films are characterized by conflicts between science and technology, human nature, social organization, or any other types of topics. So it's always science against something else. Now, they're usually set in futuristic or fantastical settings. They're created in cinema through distinctive iconographies, images, and sounds, often produced by means of special effects technology. Okay, so there's our definition. How does The Day the Earth Stood Still measure up against it? Well, pretty well. We have a spaceman and his giant robot from a planet far, far away landing on the Earth. He presents a warning to the Earth that Earthlings need to change their ways in order to maintain a peaceful coexistence with other planets in the galaxy. So scientists are involved in this story from the get-go. We do have some science here. And then there's that warning. It pertains to the social and the moral order. So that, again, goes back to the definition, humanity versus science, science versus the social order. Now, are there special effects here? Yes, there are. Now, they're not the same special effects that we would see in today's films. This film is from 1951, but there are special effects. So there we have it. This is a classic science fiction film. Okay, well, let's talk about the cast. This film stars Michael Rennie as Klaatu. He's a very human-looking visitor from that faraway planet. Then we have Patricia Neal. She's Helen Benson, a woman who lives in the same boarding house with Klaatu. Yes, Klaatu lives in a boarding house. Unbeknownst to the other residents, they're sharing their breakfast table with this alien who's on the loose. Then we've got Sam Jaffe. He's a mathematician / scientist who's gathering all the great scientists around the world together to hear an important message from Klaatu. Then we've got Hugh Marlowe. He's Tom Stevens. This is Helen's boyfriend who sees Klaatu as a rival for her affections. And then we've got Helen's son, Bobby. He's played by Billy Gray. Now, Gort is the giant robot, and he's also a traveling companion of Klaatu's. He's played by Locke Martin, who really was nearly 8 feet tall. Our director was Robert Wise. Now, we have to give a special standing ovation to Bernard Herrmann. He wrote the score for The Day the Earth Stood Still, and I think the score is the best part of this film. I'm a big fan. He wrote scores for 2 other films that we've explored on this season of The Idle Hour, Portrait of Jenny and Citizen Kane. But you know what else Bernard Herrmann wrote? He wrote several themes for, wait for it, The Twilight Zone. I know. It's, as I always say, all roads lead to The Twilight Zone. Bernard Herrmann wrote the themes for several important episodes in that series, including the pilot, Where Is Everybody?, Walking Distance, my personal favorite, The Lonely, Eye of the Beholder, Little Girl Lost, and Living Doll. But more importantly, he also wrote the opening and closing series themes for season 1. And that's actually my favorite. Those theme songs are my favorite. Now, his score for The Day the Earth Stood Still got a lot of mileage. It was reused elsewhere, namely in the 1960s television series Lost in Space and Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. It's notable for the use of that super weird instrument, the theremin. That always gives, anything that a theremin is in, it always gives kind of this spacey, futuristic kind of sound to it. Okay, well, enough of all that. Let's take a little break, hear a little song, and I'll meet you on the other side for this week's story, 1951's The Day the Earth Stood Still. Back in a moment.
Please, everyone, listen very carefully to this message. In this portion of our program, Jennifer is going to be laying down all sorts of spoilers and will ruin all of your fun if you have not yet seen the movie. Listener discretion is advised.
And now for our story. An alien visitor named Klaatu comes to Earth with an urgent message for humanity. Arriving in Washington, D.C. aboard a sleek flying saucer, Klaatu is accompanied by a powerful robot named Gort. Their arrival puts everyone on edge, and a soldier ends up shooting Klaatu, putting him in the hospital. Now, I need to stop right here because we start to get a very clear message here from the filmmakers that the people of Earth are dangerous and maybe a little bit backward. We're not portrayed in a very favorable light in this film. The Earth's first visitor from another world is shot by a crazy person. Okay, now this is supposed to be setting the stage for this warning. Earthlings are terrible. They're stupid. They're prone to terrific violence. They're really just horrible in every way. This visitor, on the other hand, seems like a super nice guy. He looks like a human being, but he's much more refined, he's more sophisticated, and he's beneficent. But is that the reality? I mean, this ship just shows up in the U.S. Capitol out of nowhere. I mean, there's no warning, no prior message, no prior greeting. There aren't any overtures in advance to reach out the hand of friendship. None of that. It just shows up. The ship lands. It just sits there in the Capitol, motionless, silent, very menacing looking. Naturally, the military is called in and they're surrounding it. I mean, no one knows what kind of threat this might pose. Now, it's worth mentioning that the military is surrounding the ship, but they're not charging at it or firing on it. They're just there, okay? They're just there in case the visitor is aggressive or tries anything. Well, the visitor, Klaatu, finally does come out. He raises his arm in greeting. That's fine. Nobody does anything at that point. But then he reaches into his pocket and he pulls out this thing that looks like a weapon, and he aims it at a soldier. Well, naturally, the soldier is going to pull his own trigger, and he shoots Klaatu. So the filmmakers would have us believe that, this was a very hostile reception on the part of the humans. But was it, or was it completely understandable given the circumstances? So I think this is the point that the story already started to break down a little bit for me. And this was within the first, 10 minutes of the movie. Now, in recovery at a local hospital, so they do take Klaatu to a hospital, he remains determined to communicate a warning to the people of Earth. What warning? Well, we don't know yet because he won't tell us. He wants all the leaders of the world to hear his message at the same time. Now, they try to lock him in the hospital because they just don't know what kind of threat he poses, right? Again, seems fairly reasonable to me. Well, of course, Klaatu is from a very advanced civilization. He's got all kinds of fancy tools and capabilities, so he breaks the lock, or, he dismantles. I can't actually remember how he escapes. But anyway, needless to say, he escapes the hospital and he ends up stealing clothing belonging to a guy named J.C. Carpenter. So he's got a briefcase that has the initials J.C. with the last name Carpenter. And I have to say, this really elicited a giant eye roll from me when I saw that. I mean, this is the too obvious setup for a metaphor, right? It's trying to align the character of Klaatu with Jesus Christ. Come on, really, really, that's what you're going to do. Now, I have to say, I ordinarily love a plot line that weaves Jesus into it, but I just don't think it works here. But anyway, Mr. Carpenter, Klaatu, lodges in this boarding house with Helen Benson and her son Bobby. Now, through them, he gets to learn about them more. He's hanging out with the son Bobby, and he's learning about human society. He learns about our fears, our hostilities, especially in the context of Cold War tensions. So I think it does bear mentioning that this film came out in 1951. There were a lot of Cold War tensions at that time. As Klaatu was learning more, he comes to understand the difficulty of reaching a divided and suspicious global population with a unified message. His experiences with ordinary people help shape his approach to delivering his warning. Okay, so he's starting to hatch a plan as to how to get his message out there. He seeks the help of Professor Barnhart. He's a leading scientist, and he hopes that this professor can help him convene all the world's intellectual leaders, if not the leaders of the country. Well, Earth's growing atomic capabilities threaten the safety of the other planets, and Klaatu has come to warn that humanity must renounce violence and join a peaceful interplanetary alliance or be destroyed. Okay, so let's be clear on this, right? So humanity is too violent for a peace-loving galaxy. So in order to rid them of the threat that humanity poses, they are going to aggressively use violence against us, annihilating us and our planet. Okay, well, we don't even have the capability of annihilating anyone. So who is really the violent threat here? Is it really humanity? Or is it Klaatu and, whatever council of galaxy leaders he's representing? Well, the film reaches its climax when Klaatu is killed by the military. He's on the run. They shoot him because, again, they see that he's a threat, or they believe anyway that he's a threat. He's on the loose. We can't find him. He's seen running. The military is in pursuit, and they shoot him. Now, this prompts Gort the robot to activate. So Gort has kind of been silent. He's been standing still as a statue this whole time. But now that Klaatu has been killed, there's something that's activated in Gort that is prompting him to use his devastating power to retaliate. However, Helen manages to deliver the most famous command in all of science fiction, Klaatu Barada Nikto. Okay, so, before Klaatu is killed, he actually tells Helen, if anything happens to me, give Gort this message, Klaatu Barada Nikta, or Nikto, Klaatu Barada Nikto. And, what does this mean? We have no idea. It was never explained. But interestingly enough, whole articles have been written about it. I went out on the internet and I Googled Klaatu Barada Nikto, and oh my gosh, there is a wealth of information out there. Everyone seems to have their own idea of what that actually means. In the film, it kind of serves as this type of safe word to de-escalate the situation. So, Klaatu gives this safe word to Helen. Helen runs to Gort. He's threatening her, but when she delivers that message, he stands down at that point. Well, then it gets a little bit weird. Gort retrieves Klaatu's body, and he revives him, but only temporarily. He doesn't have the ability to bring people back to life, and they remain living. He can just temporarily revive them. So Klaatu then addresses all of the assembled scientists, and he delivers his message. Okay, so he was dead. He's been revived. Now he's delivering the message. And I think this message is chilling on a couple of levels. Here it is.
I am leaving soon, and you will forgive me if I speak bluntly. The universe grows smaller every day, and the threat of aggression by any group, anywhere, can no longer be tolerated. There must be security for all, or no one is secure. Now, this does not mean giving up any freedom, except the freedom to act irresponsibly. Your ancestors knew this when they made laws to govern themselves and hired policemen to enforce them. We of the other planets have long accepted this principle. We have an organization for the mutual protection of all planets and for the complete elimination of aggression. The test of any such higher authority is, of course, the police force that supports it. For our policemen, we created a race of robots. Their function is to patrol the planets in spaceships like this one and preserve the peace. In matters of aggression, we have given them absolute power over us. This power cannot be revoked. At the first sign of violence, they act automatically against the aggressor. The penalty for provoking their action is too terrible to risk. The result is we live in peace, without arms or armies, secure in the knowledge that we are free from aggression and war.
Yikes. I mean, what price is too high for peace? So this highly advanced civilization eradicated their own aggressive tendencies by giving their robots power over them? If anyone steps out of line, wham, the consequences are severe. Well, this is an extremely bad plan, and they're spreading that plan throughout the galaxy. Okay, so let's sort this out. The Klaatu and his group, they're afraid that humans are going to disrupt things with occasional violence. And I should mention, they never say anything about the great kindness and compassion human beings are also capable of. They only focus on the violence, right? Okay, so they're afraid that human beings are going to, create these acts of violence. So they're spreading their peace through threats methodology across the galaxy instead. Well, that's the most fragile type of peace there is. So I don't know. As you can see, I have some problems with this entire premise. Well, that's essentially how it ends. Gort and Klaatu get in the spaceship and leave. Now, let me say a few things about the short story The Day the Earth Stood Still is based on. As I said before, that film is loosely based on the story Farewell to the Master by Harry Bates. Now, there are some notable differences between the film and the short story. In the short story, the flying saucer doesn't fly in and then land. It just materializes, suggesting that this may be a time ship traveling through time. Well, regardless, Klaatu is killed early on, but he's not killed by a soldier. He's killed by some crazy person who's up in a tree, right? This person is afraid, and he shoots Klaatu. Well, there are a number of other differences, but I think the main thing is to look at what this story is famous for. It's famous for its twist ending. Now, the story is narrated by a photojournalist named Cliff, who's been investigating the robot. At the end, Klaatu is dead, and the robot is carrying him. So let me read the last paragraph so you can see how the short story wraps up. Of all the things Cliff had wanted to say to Klaatu, one remained imperatively present in his mind. Now, as the green metal robot stood framed in the great green ship, he seized his chance. Gnut, you must do one thing for me. Listen carefully. I want you to tell your master that what happened to Klaatu was an accident for which all Earth is immeasurably sorry. Will you do that? Now, let me step aside here for a moment. Notice here that he's talking to the robot as if the robot is in service to Klaatu and the others from Klaatu's planet. That was the tone and the, kind of the angle all along throughout the story. All right, back to the paragraph. The robot answers him. I have known it. Cliff continues, but will you promise to tell your master just those words as soon as he's arrived? You misunderstand, said Newt gently. I am the master. There's our twist ending. Okay, so here the robot is depicted as kind of this gentle giant, right? But he's still the master over a race of humanoids. I think this is really chilling. As I read this, and also, honestly, as I watched the movie, I thought about how timely this is with so much focus on AI taking people's jobs and having such an impact on society already. I have to say I'm very excited about the possibilities of AI, but we are going to want to proceed very cautiously. I use AI myself in a fairly rudimentary way. I'm definitely no expert on it. But even in my light use of AI, it has blown me away. The fact that it's learning and changing and evolving all the time. Well, this is a whole new thing. We haven't encountered this before. Someday, I'll tell you the true story of why Lorenzo is no longer my announcer in Superfan. And it's not because he got a job working for Walmart as a chatbot. It has everything to do with AI learning and changing. In the not-too-distant future, I think we could be faced with the question of who is really in charge, us or AI. So maybe that's why I found this storyline to be so unsettling, I guess is the word. Okay, well, on that happy note, let's have a brief intermission and also a PSA from our pretend sponsor, the National Safety Council. Let's buckle up, everyone. The life we save may be our own.
Careful driving is a sign of an intelligent grown-up. Handling a car recklessly is kid stuff, so be a responsible driver. The life you save may be your own.
Buckle up for safety, buckle up. Buckle up for safety, always buckle up. Pull your seat belt snug, give an extra tug. Buckle up for safety, buckle up.
Buckle up for safety, buckle up. Buckle up for safety, always buckle up. Show the world you care by the belt you wear. Buckle up for safety when you're driving. Buckle up for safety, buckle up. Buckle up for safety, always buckle up. Put your mind at ease, tell your riders please. Get your seat belts buckled, everybody buckle up.
The National Safety Council says, if you don't have seatbelts, get them. If you do have seatbelts, use them. Seatbelts can and do save lives every day.
Buckle up for safety, everybody buckle up.
It's intermission time. Time for that stretch you've been wanting. And best of all, time to take your pick from that scrumptious array of tasty treats waiting for you at the snack bar, where the popcorn's poppin', the cold drinks are sparkling, the hot dogs are sizzling, the coffee is steaming, and a luscious treasure of confectionery delights with ice cream and candy and so much more to tempt any taste is waiting for you now at the snack bar. You'll be notified in plenty of time when the next show is about to begin.
Hey, Jennifer.
Are you still here?
I did something nice for you.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, I recorded a new overview of your rating system.
You did?
Yes, the old one had Lorenzo's voice. I love Lorenzo like a brother, but he has no class.
Well...
Let me play it for you. Listeners, I invite you to sit back and relax with an inspiring beverage. Maybe also get a pillow, as I am about to share with you some otherwise boring information about how Jennifer rates the films in this series. Films are placed into one of these categories. Unwatchable. These films are very bad. I beg you, do not be a fool and watch them. They are not worth your time. Then there are watchable films. These films are okay. You have my permission to watch them. They are entertaining and a nice way to pass the time. But please understand me when I say that these watchable films will not change the trajectory of your life in any way. Yes, I suppose you could watch them a second time. But come now, why would you want to? And now we come to our last group, the rewatchable films. These films are very good. You may think your life is already complete. I'm here to tell you it is not. Only when you have watched these films over and over and over again can you truly say, you have lived. So friends and ladies, those are our film categories. Unwatchable, watchable, and rewatchable. Now Jennifer has some sort of worksheet she uses to categorize the films, but no one really cares about that. So, we move on. Are there any questions? No? Very good. I thank you for your attention. Now, let's get on with the show. Ah, that is nice, no?
Well, honestly, I don't hate it.
Please, I must ask you not to embarrass me with such high praise.
Well, thanks, Nico. We did need a new ratings overview.
No thanks is necessary. Your remembrance of this service at Contractime is more than enough expression of your appreciation.
If I decide you can stay, and that's a big if at this point, there won't be any contract, Nico.
I see. Well, I'm sure when it comes to compensation, your generosity will not be outdone.
Nico, there is no compensation for this job.
Oh, you expect me to do this job for free?
I didn't expect you to do this job at all.
Well, you make me a tempting offer. May I have a few moments to think about it?
Sure. Take all the time you need. And while you're doing that, let me get to my rating. Now, what Nico didn't explain in his overview is that I consider 5 things in determining if a film is unwatchable, watchable, or rewatchable. Let me break it down. Story. Was this an interesting and entertaining story worth telling? Well, I'm awarding this 2 out of 5 diamonds. That's a pretty low score. It was entertaining. I did not hate this film. Especially when we look at the first several minutes when the flying saucer is coming into Washington, D.C. That's when we have Bernard Herrmann's fabulous score in the background, and it lends kind of this frenetic, nervous energy to the scene. I think that was the best part of the whole movie. But the actual story just didn't do it for me. I would have liked a more faithful telling of Bates' original story. Where the real discussion point was not, why do we as human beings need to change, but what is the wisdom of relinquishing freedom and authority to machines? That, to me, is the interesting angle here, but I didn't feel like it got that emphasis at all in the film. Now, something I forgot to mention is why this film is entitled The Day the Earth Stood Still. What is it that's referring to? Well, to get the world's attention, Klaatu and the robot arranged for all the mechanical things, elevators, cars, lights, etc., to stop working around the world for 30 minutes. Now, this was intended to be a show of power without any immediate long-lasting harm. So, again, this was just a way of getting the world's attention. And to their credit, they made sure that the planes that were already in the air and hospitals were not affected by this, blackout for 30 minutes. Now, this was the moment the Earth stood still. And it's also, when the Earth started contemplating the powerful force that they were up against. Now, what about character development? Were the characters dimensional? Did their actions ring true? I'm giving this a very generous 3 diamonds out of 5 for character development. I mean, the characters, for the most part, were secondary to the message about humanity. There was not a lot of dimension there, but I don't expect a lot of dimension with the characters in sci-fi films. You can get by with undeveloped characters in sci-fi that you really can't get by with in more classically dramatic films. I have to say also that the best acting in this film came from the robot. And I'm really not kidding. At one point in the film, the robot had been still as a statue for a long time. And then suddenly the visor in his helmet rises very slowly in this menacing way. That was really well done. Writing. Was the dialogue beautiful, funny, poignant, and/or thought-provoking? I'm going to go with 2 out of 5 diamonds for writing. Yeah, I know, it's pretty low. But the writing, it did a serviceable job. It conveyed the plot. There was no poetry here. There weren't even any memorable lines other than that crazy Klaatu Barada Nikto. So what cost the writing an additional diamond here? I was going to go for a 3. I gave it a 2. And what did it was that clumsy attempt at the Klaatu Jesus metaphor. It just was not set up very well. It was too obvious. And, as I said before, I love films that beautifully weave aspects of the Jesus narrative into the plot line. But here it was awkward, conspicuous, and that wasn't a very good alignment. Klaatu was not a Jesus figure, in my opinion, in this film. And then that leads us to pace. At what speed did the story unfold? The pace of this film was perfect, just right. It moved along. It was not too slow, not too fast. 5 diamonds. And then discussability. Does the story have enough depth to explore and analyze through discussion? I'm actually going higher with this score, 3 diamonds. Although I'm reluctant about it, I was wavering between 2 and 3. I do think there are some things to talk about here. Some of the things that I've mentioned before, the relationship between man and machine, the question about whether peace is something that justifies any means. But those topics are really beyond the story itself. Those are more philosophical. We don't really need the story of this film to talk about those things, but the film did present these topics to us, so I'm going to go with 3 diamonds. Well, that gives us a grand total of 3 diamonds. That's putting it in the watchable category. And listen, it is watchable. I fired some grenades at this film, but it was entertaining, and it had that incredible Bernard Herrmann score. So, yeah, I do recommend that you watch it. Will I watch it again? Is it rewatchable? No, definitely not. Now, if you haven't seen The Day the Earth Stood Still and want to, I have some really good news for you. It's out on YouTube, and you can watch it for free.
And now, it's time for Idle Hour Trivia.
Oh, Nico, I see that you re-recorded the intro for the trivia question, too.
Of course.
Well, you seem to be working hard. I'll give you that.
Thank you.
But did you watch the film?
You mean The Day the Earth Stood Still? Of course.
You did?
This surprises you.
Well, I mean, Lorenzo never watched the films.
Lorenzo, you know I love him like a brother, but he is completely unreliable.
Anyway, here's this week's question. The 1950s was an exciting time for science fiction film lovers. A lot of classics of the genre were released in that decade. Which of the following science fiction films from that decade was the biggest hit in terms of ticket sales? A, The Day the Earth Stood Still from 1951, B, The War of the Worlds in 1953, or C, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea in 1954?
Ah, the answer is clear, but I wouldn't dream of spoiling it for our listeners.
Good. That's right. 20 seconds, everyone. Okay, that's time. Which film was the biggest hit? The Day the Earth Stood Still, The War of the Worlds, or 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea?
Jennifer, may I submit my answer now?
Sure, go ahead.
It is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
You are correct. That was a huge hit for the Walt Disney Studios. It had some big stars in it, too, including Kirk Douglas, James Mason, Paul Lucas, and Peter Lorre. It also won 2 Academy Awards for Best Art Direction and Best Special Effects, and it was nominated for Best Film Editing. But you know what? Our film, The Day the Earth Stood Still, was a hit in its own right. And in terms of critical acclaim, despite its lack of Academy Award nominations, it is generally considered one of the best science fiction films ever made. Hey everybody, look who's wandered into the studio. It's Olive, my little Maltese. Hello, Olive. Now, Olive just turned 9 years old, and I can hardly believe it. Where does the time go? I remember when I brought her home, I think she was like 11 or 12 weeks old, and she was just like this little puff of white fur. She didn't weigh anything at all, and she was about the size of my shoe. Well, since then, we've had a lot of adventures. She was with me through a couple of job changes. She was with me when we changed cities for a little bit, and she was with me during the global pandemic. And now here we are, settled into a quiet life where we spend most of our time together. I don't know what I would do without this little sweetheart. Well, if you'd like to see a picture of Olive, I posted one out on the Vintage Century Idle Hour channel page out on YouTube. Well, anyway, Olive's birthday got me to thinking about the special role that dogs play in the human story. Cats, horses, dogs, the companion animals, we really need them, don't we? Of course, my great love is for dogs. I've had dogs forever, and a life without a dog? That's just inconceivable to me. I can't even imagine it. Well, Hollywood has loved dogs too, featuring them in movies and television shows almost from the very beginning. Now, here's a clip featuring a dog who's perhaps the most famous of them all, Lassie.
I'm glad you're my dog, and you always will be, won't you, girl?
Now, the story of Lassie is a long one, dating back to a short story in the 1930s, a novel in the 1940s, and then a feature film starring Elizabeth Taylor and Roddy McDowall. And that was followed by other films and television series. But I'd like to focus on the first Lassie. Now, by the way, lassie is a Scottish word for girl or young woman. Sidebar, I know this because back in high school, I was on the drill team, and we were called the Bonnie Lassies. Yes, I know, a little bit embarrassing, but it's the truth. Okay, I digress. Lassie was played by a canine actor named Pal, who was not a young woman, but a male dog. He was born in 1940 and he died in 1958 at the age of 18. So that's a pretty good age for a big dog. So according to Wikipedia, Pal's big break into the movies came in 1943 during the filming of the MGM classic Lassie Come Home. Now, the studio had decided that they were going to use a show collie, not Pal, but a different dog in that film. But they were doing some filming of this massive flood that had happened in the San Joaquin River Valley in Central California. They wanted to take advantage of that. Apparently that really happened. So they wanted to take some advantage of that to get some footage. And they used Pal in some of that footage. And Pal just performed so well that they were able to complete the scene in one take. Now, the owner, I think his name was Weathermax. Is that right? I think the name of the owner was Weathermax, and he was also a trainer. He said that the director of that film, Fred Wilcox, was so impressed with Pal that he actually had tears in his eyes. Wow. Well, in response, the producers released the original collie and hired Pal in her place, reshooting the first 6 weeks of the film with Pal now portraying Lassie. Well, now that's quite a thing because I know that was expensive to do all that reshooting. Now, other sources say that the female collie was replaced not because Pal was so great, but because she was shedding. They were filming in the summer. It was hot. She was shedding a lot. So, I don't know. We may never know what the true story is. Okay, so here is Pal's IMBD bio. Pal, the dog, who was a rough collie, was born on June 8, 1940 in North Hollywood, California. He's best known and remembered for Lassie Come Home in 1943 and Courage of Lassie in 1946, as well as The Painted Hills in 1951. Though he was a male, he received notoriety for playing the famous character Lassie. He was retired from acting in 1954. The son of Pal's trainer, Rudd Weatherwax, okay, yeah, so it was Weatherwax, said his father was very affected upon the death of Pal in 1958. It hit him very hard when Pal died. He buried him in a special place on the ranch and would often visit the grave. Dad would never again watch an MGM Lassie movie. He just couldn't bear to see Pal. He didn't want to have to be reminded of just how much he loved that dog. That was his son. After playing the original Lassie in Lassie Come Home in 1943, Pal was cast in the follow-up Son of Lassie in 1945. Almost all the dogs in subsequent Lassie films and television series have been descendants of Pal. The dog who played Lassie for the first half of Season 2 of the TV series Lassie in 1997, and the dog who played Lassie in the 2005 version were not. Okay, so who are some of the other famous dogs from the golden age of Hollywood? Well, if we go back to the 1920s, there was Rin Tin Tin. Rin Tin Tin was a German shepherd who had been rescued on a battlefield in World War I by an American soldier. That soldier's name was Lee Duncan, and Duncan later trained the dog and obtained work for him in silent films. Now, Rin Tin Tin was hugely popular in the 1920s, and he's even credited with saving Warner Brothers from bankruptcy. Now, in the 1930s, we had Petey, the dog with the circle around one eye that was on the Our Gang series of films. Petey was an American Pit Bull Terrier who was born in 1929 and died in 1946. Now, circle around his eye was added by Hollywood makeup artist Max Factor. Asta was a canine actor in the Thin Man series of films from 1934 to 1947. Now, Asta was played by Skippy, a wire fox terrier. Skippy was known for incredible comedic timing. Now let's jump to the 1950s for Old Yeller, that heartbreaker of a film. Old Yeller was played by Spike, who was owned by the same family who owned Pal, who played Lassie. Now, Spike was a Labrador Retriever and Mastiff mix, born in 1955. He'd been a shelter rescue dog before hitting the big time in such Hollywood films as The She Creature, A Dog of Flanders, The Westerner, Zane Grey Theater, The Mickey Mouse Club, and the Disney Anthology series. Spike died in 1971. Okay, so I skipped a superstar dog from the 1930s. Terry, a female Cairn Terrier best known for her portrayal of Toto in The Wizard of Oz. Now, Terry was born in 1933, and I have to say, her filmography is pretty extensive. You know, according to my count, she was in 21 feature films beginning in 1934. Now, The Wizard of Oz was not her only film in 1939. She also appeared in The Women, which, by the way, is on our list of films to explore in a future episode of The Idle Hour. We'll have to look for her in the beauty shop scene. Well, according to Wikipedia, Terry did her own stunts, but she was seriously injured during the filming of The Wizard of Oz when someone stepped on one of her paws. She spent 2 weeks recuperating at the home of Judy Garland. And during that time, Garland formed a really deep attachment to her. I mean, of course, can't you imagine? Garland offered to buy her from the owner, but Terry was a little cash cow, or cash dog, as it were. She was bringing in $125 a week. That would have been about $3,000 a week today. That was more than many human actors were making in film at the time, and more than the average American worker was making at the time. So naturally, the owner was not really keen on selling her. Well, Terry even attended the premiere of The Wizard of Oz at Grauman's Chinese Theater. Her final film role was in Easy to Look At in 1945. She died in September of that year. She was 11 years old. Ah, there's the clock. It's time for us to say goodbye.
Jennifer, I have come to a very important decision that pertains to your career in podcasting.
Oh, is that so? And what might that be?
I thought it over, and I have decided to accept your offer of employment. I will fulfill the role of announcer and superfan.
Yeah, well, I don't recall actually making that offer.
There is no need to thank me. I'll start right away.
All right, you wore me down. Also, you were somewhat helpful during this show. This may be the worst decision I've ever made, but okay, you've got the job on a trial basis. Let's call this probation.
This is wonderful. Truly. It's the best thing that ever happened to you.
Well, thanks everyone for hanging out with us tonight. Program note, there will not be an episode next week. But when I come back, we'll do a season finale. How does that sound? Have a great couple of weeks, everyone. And when those weeks are done, come on back. We'll be waiting here for you. Say goodbye, Nico.
Goodbye, Nico.
You did it right.
What do you mean?
Well, Rodney just couldn't get the clothes down.
Rodney? Ha! He was such a simpleton.